demographic mix here. There are students coming, there are professors, lawyers, doctors, young people, old people, families with children, pensioners. There's even a frequent sight out here is older women in floor-length fur coats. It's been a joke that the new winter fashion in Kiev is, they're called shuba, so floor-length shuba with orange hard hats. And most people here tend to be in great agreement about what they want, which is a fundamental change to this system. The government, especially the government under the control of the Party of Regions, is understood by many people here to be the result of a gradual takeover of the Ukrainian state by a mafia network that existed in the southeast part of the country. You know, many people outside of Ukraine are not aware that Yanukovych actually has a criminal history. He has spent time in jail for robbery. He has spent time in jail for sexual assault, and now he's running the country. So for the most part, pretty much everyone has the same goal in mind, which is essentially liberating the Ukrainian government from this group of people who have come in from the southeast. There is disagreement about how that should best be achieved, but for the most part, there has been a fantastic amount of harmony with protesters here.
Jennifer Carroll, a PhD student at the University of Washington, living in Kiev. And that's Tuesday's edition of FSN Reports. You can tell us what you think of the programme by emailing us, reports@featurestory.com. And you can follow us on Twitter. We're there at FeatureStory. Coming up on Wednesday, the long-awaited Farm Bill comes into focus. We'll have all the details from Capitol Hill. That's Wednesday, but for now, I'm Kevin McAleese in Washington, alongside producer Simon Marks and Rebecca Foster on the Bulletin Desk. For everyone with Feature Story news everywhere, have a great evening. Goodbye.
The Labor Forum is brought to you each week by your Teamster friends and neighbors. The Teamsters have over a century of experience in enriching and protecting the rights of workers nationwide, and they continue to build on that proud legacy every day. With 1.4 million members, 30% of whom are women, Teamsters can be found in almost every major industry. They're the hard-working men and women whose jobs have always helped keep America strong, while providing the goods and services that keep the country running smoothly. Want more information? www.teamster.org.
Boom, boom, doo 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 doo, boom, boom, doo 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 doo, boom, boom, doo 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 doo, boom, boom, doo 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 doo, boom, boom, doo 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 doo, boom, boom, doo 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 doo.
We plant the food, we drive the cab, we load the ship, we run the lab, we build the bridges, we fly the plane, we do the work. This is our day, we do the work.
Boom, boom.
We do the work.
Boom, boom.
We do the work. This is our day. We type the page. We clean the streets.
Good afternoon. Welcome to the Labor Forum here on WRFG 89.3 FM in Atlanta. My name is Diane Mathowitz. I am a retired auto worker and the host of this program for about the last 3 years. I'd like to give a shout out to Gary Washington, who initiated this program in 1986. Everyone here thanks Gary for taking the step to make sure that workers' voices are always part of the programming here at WRFG. The opinions that are expressed on this program may not necessarily be those of the Board of Directors, staff, or volunteers at WRFG. I do hope you always enjoy the music that opens and closes this program. I think both songs reflect the intention of the program to raise up all of the workers who by doing the work keep society running. And also at the end of the program, this music encourages all of us to stand up against exploitation and racism. Today's program highlights the severe failings, I guess the words I'm going to use, the severe failings of the criminal justice system that we have here in the United States, where more than 2 million people, mostly poor and working people, are in prison. This is the highest incarceration rate in the entire world. And Mark Burton is on the phone. He is a Denver criminal defense attorney, and he's going to tell us about the case of Clarence Moses-el. Hi, Mark. Thank you so much for joining us.
Hi, Diane. Thanks for inviting me.
Well, I have been doing a lot of reading about this case, and I have to say that it is just an extraordinary example of the failure of this system to render any sort of justice. So could you please let our listeners know the background and just the basics of this case, of this man who's been in prison 27 years now?
Yeah, the basic facts of the case, I'll try and make it as brief as possible, are that a woman in Denver, this is back in 1987, complained of being assaulted and sexually assaulted, and named 3 people who were possibly the perpetrator. And they were 3 people she'd actually been drinking with earlier in the evening. The police did an investigation, and there was no forced entry. There was no physical evidence. And then almost 2 days later, she decided that she had a dream, and that the real perpetrator was this other person called Clarence Moses-el, who she'd named these other 3 people 3 or 4 times to the police, to the doctors. And then Mr. Moses-el was arrested for this, despite the fact there was no physical evidence. He went to trial on this case. There was some semen found in her that was analyzed, but not analyzed with using DNA, using just blood typing. And even the blood typing really didn't match him, which is a very crude tool. And he was convicted. And then pro se, which means by himself, he filed an appeal and asked for demanded a test of the evidence for DNA to see who was really the perpetrator of this crime. And he's a very poor man, and he's been in prison since 1987, been in jail. He raised the money to do the testing, and finally the Denver District Court ordered that the testing was supposed to happen. And then a month before the testing was supposed to happen, the Denver police destroyed the evidence. So they destroyed all the evidence. He couldn't get his testing. He had a hearing, and the court basically said, too bad, too sad. You haven't shown that they did it on purpose, and you're just out of luck. And he's been in prison ever since then. Now, last year, another man came forward who was in prison, who actually was in prison for sexual assault, and wrote Mr. Moses-el a letter in prison that he was actually the person who was with the victim on the night in question and who had sexual relations. And actually, he said that sexual relations were consensual, but he'd actually beat her. Now, he was one of the men that she had first named, one of the 3, and he also happened to be, at the time of the incident, the boyfriend of her best friend. And we've now filed a petition in court to try and persuade the court that Mr. Moses-el deserves a new trial.
Well, it seems pretty obvious to me that all along, this has been a very strange case. That, as you said, the victim in the case, or the person who reported a crime, gave the names of 3 people, and then claimed that, the way I understand it, that in a dream she had a vision that this other man was the one who assaulted her.
Yes.
And that was the evidence at trial. It's just preposterous.
Mm-hmm. It was preposterous. And this poor man, I think he's going on 27 years. He's been in prison on this case.
So, Mark, how did you get involved?
A few years ago, Mr. Moses-el got into contact with me because people, and I've been on the case ever since. And we determined that until we found some new evidence, we probably wouldn't be able to get back into court. And now we have it. And then we presented we presented the evidence to the district attorney, but the district attorney hasn't taken any action on it.
Let's talk about this district attorney a little bit, because one of the things I thought that this case highlighted, and that I really wanted to talk about, because in some respects there's sort of this thought that the people who are in prison somehow, did whatever it is, and that they should be there, and that they had an opportunity to make a defense in a trial. And it just strikes me that for too many working class families, for too many poor people, that is just a total lie. I mean, that isn't what happens. And so
No.
I sort of thought his case really brings this up, because the issue of criminal justice or criminal injustice, in my opinion, is really a big issue of importance to workers and to the majority of people in this country who don't have money for big fancy lawyers.
Exactly. That's right. As you said in your introduction, we incarcerate more people, at least per capita, usually, and more than anybody else in the world. We have approximately a little less than 5% of the world population, and yet we have 25% of the world's prisoners. And a lot of these cases that are later overturned, or they were cases of mostly of poor people who didn't have a lot of resources, who didn't have expert witnesses or experts to investigate the case, such as DNA. There wasn't a DNA expert in this case originally, and there wasn't even a serologist, which was blood, and that's often what happens. Is that through lack of resources, or sometimes through other reasons, people lie, the police fudge the evidence, all sorts of reasons, people are wrongfully convicted.
I want to talk a little bit about this Supreme Court decision that is the basis for these judges now saying what you said, that was like too bad, too sad, that when the police destroy evidence that a judge ordered them to keep, that somehow there's no consequences here except to the poor person who's in jail wrongfully.
Yeah, unfortunately, the standard of the case law is really bad for the defendant. The defendant actually has to go to court and prove that the police did it out of malice, basically. And it's you don't know what goes on in the police department. And it's extremely hard to show that, even if it's true. Gross negligence isn't good enough. I mean, if they're grossly negligent with the evidence, well, that's just tough. There's no consequences to the case.
And so this district attorney, I wrote his name down. Let me see where it is. I know you know it. What's the district attorney's name?
His name is Mitch Morrissey.
Right. Let's talk a little bit about him and his relationship to this case, because it seems as though, one of the things that always comes to play in any kind of authority, a figure, is admitting that they made a mistake. And so
Right.
I'm just wondering if you could talk a little bit about this. I mean, it seems pretty clear that mistakes have been made in Mr. Moses-el's case.
Right. There's been, mistakes made by a lot of people in this case, and if you're talking about the mistakes of the police, like destroying the evidence, assuming that was a mistake, the district attorney has not really taken that into consideration that I know of, because there was a hearing about this back in, I think it was 1996 or 1997, and the same district attorney was involved. He's been involved in the case. His office has been involved in the case, and he's been involved in the case since about 2000, personally. They fought to keep him in prison.
Okay, so I mean, one of the things obviously that happens here is that district attorneys get reelected on the basis of being tough on crime, about having a high percentage of victories in court, the number of people they put away. And so again, we have a situation where a judge orders the Denver police to keep the evidence that Mr. Moses-el has said from the very beginning would exonerate him, and then, for whatever reason, they throw it in a trash can and dumpster, and it's gone. And then somebody actually confesses and has details of what occurred.
Right.
And then as I read the material, his blood type is a closer match than Mr. Moses-el.
Yes. The blood typing of his, basically in the hearing in the 1990s, the defense produced an expert saying that Mr. Moses-el actually should have been at least presumptively excluded as the donor of the semen in the case, which means that barring some remote exception, that it was not him. This is not DNA again. We're talking about serology. That's what happened then. Yes, and through his other case, this man who's now confessed, at least to being assaulted, we've gotten. Fortunately, he was old enough where they did both serology and DNA. Now we can't compare the DNA because we don't have the evidence from the case. But his serology, his blood typing, is a better match for the. He can't be excluded as the donor. That's basically what an expert would say. That it's a much better match than Mr. Moses.
Mark, I'm going to ask you if you sort of extrapolate from this case and maybe talk a little more broadly about, the court rulings that have made it more difficult for people to be able to convince a jury that they are innocent.
Yeah, well, it's not just court rulings. There's a lot of factors that go into this. There are, for example, there's mistakes of lawyers, and there's also, overworked public defenders' offices, court-appointed attorneys who are overworked and understaffed, and don't have enough resources to do this. We've also, through the media, as you said, the media attack on on crime, the war on crime, since basically the 1970s. There's been this sort of hostile environment towards criminal defendants. It's almost like a political attack that has been going on since the 1970s. It's really since Richard Nixon. And it's really, go ahead, I'm sorry.
It's okay, Mark. Can you hold your thought? We're going to take a short break for an important announcement, and we will be right back.
All right.
Greetings, WRFG family and friends. We trust all are safe, sound, and thawed out from the icy, stormy weather we just came through here in Atlanta. As is typical of this season, our funding sources are to a slow grind, and we are in need of your financial support. We are once again launching the 100 by 100 campaign. The campaign goal is to get at least 100 people to each donate $100 by the end of the month. Your help is essential if WRFG is to get through this cash flow crunch. In addition to your own contribution, we are asking that you do the following. Promote the 100 by 100 campaign as often as possible to your friends and family. Encourage them to donate online at WRFG.org. Click How to Donate and select the 100 by 100 option. Also, post an email on your Facebook or other social media and ask friends to post it as well. Call friends, relatives, co-workers, etc. Send the appeal to your email lists. Feel free to post, email, tweet, recite it over the phone. Every bit helps. Thank you all so much for supporting your favorite community radio station, WRFG 89.3 FM, your station for progressive information and hand-picked quality music.
We're back. This is Diane Mathewitz. I definitely want to second that appeal. There probably isn't any other place here in Metro Atlanta that you'd hear about this case of Mr. Clarence Moses-el, and I want to make sure that the station stays on the air so that this kind of information can be available. So now, Mark, you are one of the attorneys that's handling his case, and I know that you're also a community activist. And so one of the things that always comes up is the relationship between what happens in the courtroom and what can be done legally through law and through just the trial procedure and appeal procedures. And then there's the role that the community can play. I was wondering if you'd want to address that a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes in cases like this that are of public interest, there's really like a twofold, I would say, battle. there's a battle in the courtroom over the evidence, over the interpretation of the law, and there's also sort of a battle of ideas. I don't know if it's a battle, but support for the case and for the defendant from the community, and sometimes that is really the key. I mean, we've seen cases like Lynn Stewart recently, where there was a lot of concern for her, and she was just, due to her health, she was the attorney from New York who was imprisoned for 10 years or more, and she came down with terrible cancer. And it was really through community pressure, sometimes more than what the attorneys do. I mean, it depends, but they're both important, that she was released. I think sometimes there's the case of Mumia Abu-Jamal, who was on death row, and there's been a community outcry all across the country, and also really all across the world, particularly in Europe, and his death penalty his sentence was vacated. So sometimes there's this dual, I don't know what you want to call it, dual struggle. There's the struggle in the courtroom, and there's also the struggle of ideas outside the courtroom, and pressure, because when it comes down to it, judges are really political figures. We pretend in our country that they're immune, they just read books in these offices, but they're political figures as well. A lot of them are elected or somehow selected. So we have these two, as you said, we have these two struggles that sometimes go on with cases of public interest like this.
Well, okay, so the way I understand it, you have filed some more papers to get another court hearing.
Right.
Is this, and that's largely, this is on the basis of this man, L.C. Jackson, essentially confessing.
Yeah. Yes, the equivalent, the name would be, it's not called this in Colorado anymore, it would be like a habeas corpus, stating that we have new evidence, and based on this new evidence, if you look at the record as a whole, that if he were given a new trial, that he would probably be acquitted. And so that's what we've claimed in court.
And I know that all this goes very slowly. So simultaneously, can the district attorney, this Mr. Morrissey, does he have some role yet in this?
Yeah, he is the way our system works. He would be what we call opposing counsel. Doesn't mean he has to oppose it, but he would be taking what they call the government's position. Sometimes they agree with us, sometimes they don't. Usually they don't. So he would be defending the conviction in court.
All right. So if you would explain both to me and our audience, so he has an option, right? He can look at this and say, "Well, I think there really was a mistake." I think yes. Okay. And are you saying that up to this point, he has said no, everything about this case is kosher, and he had his day in court, and he was found guilty, and everything is fine?
I don't want to put words in his mouth, but that's essentially his position. And I just let you know that I had another case in Denver where we came up with new evidence, and the district attorney on the case actually said, "Wow, if this is true, I'm not going to oppose this." And eventually he agreed with us.
Okay, but Mr. Morrissey has not taken that position now, despite a confession and despite the egregious, we'll call it egregious, error of the Denver Police Department in throwing out court-ordered evidence that was supposed to be saved. All right, so this is a radio station, and this is a radio program that wants to let our listeners know that they always have an opportunity to take action. So what is it that is being done to let people know about this case and to present their support for this some modicum of justice here?
Well, some activists have got together and have started a petition and also a calling campaign to the district attorneys to try and persuade them that perhaps the most just outcome would be to let Mr. Clarence Moses go, to let him out of prison because he's not guilty. And would you like me to give some information about that?
Sure. If there's some websites or something that people could go to for further information and for further action, please do give it now.
Yeah. On Facebook, it's www.facebook.com, free Clarence Moses. There's a page. And then on the internet, it's peoplespower.assembly.org under petitions/petitions. And that's peoplespowerAssemblis.org. Also, on that website, they're also having petitions and giving updates on the case.
Well, when I went on the internet and just put in his name, I saw an article. I guess it's by the Denver newspaper. No, it was by. I did see the article in 2007, where apparently the Denver Post did a whole series, and they did a highlight story on Mr. Clarence Moses-el. But they said in this article that they wrote way back in 2007, so we're talking 7 years ago, that at that time they had found 141 prisoners whose appeals had been, stopped in their tracks because the DNA evidence held by the police had been tossed out.
Yeah, at that time, because of these scandals, really outrageous conduct, because we're playing with people's lives here. The Colorado legislature at that time passed a law stating that the DAs had to keep DNA evidence of this kind for indefinitely. So that has hopefully stopped, but that doesn't help Mr. Clarence Moses-el, who's convicted in 1988.
Nor apparently these other 141 people that they found in 2007.
Yeah.
And of course, here in Georgia as well, we've had a number of people who've served decades in Georgia prisons that the Innocence Project, through the use of DNA, has discovered had nothing to do with the crimes, and who spent, as I said, decades behind bars, just in a most tragic miscarriage of justice.
Yes.
So in these last few minutes of this interview, I assume that you speak to Mr. Moses-el, and I was just wondering how it is that when he got this news that this evidence, the DNA evidence, that he was so sure, because he knows he wasn't involved, would free him, how he's managed to how he's managed.
Well, he's an extraordinarily, he has an extraordinarily strong character in that he maintains his innocence. He keeps going forward. I understand that this time he's kind of not trying to let himself get too excited because of the disappointment he had last time. But he has, anybody who will listen to him, talk to other people who've been incarcerated with him, he will tell you all about his case, how he's not innocent, and all about the evidence. He keeps going. He's really a remarkable man.
I saw again in this newspaper article that he has 2 children and a wife and grandchildren, and that his hope is to be able to get out now after 27 years, having missed the childhood and adulthood of his own children, to be able to experience it with his grandkids.
Yes, he is looking forward to that.
Well, I want to thank you so much, Mark, for giving us this time. And if you would just one more time give the website info for the petition and any of the other background information so that listeners can help.
Yeah, on Facebook it's Free Clarence Moses, and on the internet it's peoplespowerassemblies.org.
Thank you so much, and please do keep us abreast of what happens, developments in this case.
I will, and thank you so much for inviting me.
Okay. That was Mark Burton. He's one of the lawyers who is trying to free Mr. Clarence Moses-el, who's been incarcerated in Colorado for 27 years for a crime he didn't commit. I want to make one last announcement. We've had numerous programs here about the unemployment compensation battle, where the various state officials are trying to stop school workers who, such as bus drivers and cafeteria workers, from getting unemployment during the summer. There tomorrow being Thursday, 1 o'clock, there will be a hearing on this in room 506 of the Coverdale building, which is across from the Capitol. This is Diane Mathowitz, hoping you'll tune in again next week, Tuesday and Wednesday, 4:30 to 5 for the Labor Forum. Bye.
We will not bow down to